Hello and welcome to Conversations with Nurit. My guest today is the lovely Lisa Cairns, coming to us from Holland, the Netherlands. And I'm Nurit. I'm in Budapest, and I haven't met Lisa actually, but I found out about Lisa about 3 years ago. I was in a very similar situation to yours at the time. My boyfriend was also my teacher, and I had just woken up from a 40-year search and a spiritual search. And I somehow stumbled upon your video. And the first thing that I heard was, "There's no search, there's no seeker." And I go, "Yes! Hallelujah." So that was my introduction to Lisa. And I immediately called my boyfriend, and we both listened to the tape, and he kept going, "That's right on, man, right on, man," the whole time. So I love your message, and perhaps you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, basically I talk about the non-divide of what is. As people, we're taught and we believe that we're something separate, that we're a separate soul inside the body, and we're a separate person with individual choice and individual free will. And we believe that we run our lives. And I basically expose that myth, that that's an impossibility. Science even proves that it's impossible, that there is somebody inside the body with free will and choice. It's becoming more popular now, I think, in society. And so I just explore this and talk about this with people, and it point out the completion of what is when that you stops believing it's running its life.
Wonderful. And when people come to hear you for the first time, obviously people who haven't heard you before or haven't been exposed to this, they're still in the thought stream. How do people respond to this message when they're still in the thought stream?
I don't exactly know what you mean by thought stream. I don't use those words myself.
Okay, yeah, I figured that we probably would have differences of words. They're still in the mind. They're still very much identified with being a person, and they believe their story, and they're, like something. Yeah.
It depends. I think with my talks, it's an energetic resonance, and some bodies are ready to hear this and some aren't. And so if they're ready, then they tend to want to listen to this and maybe get a little bit hooked on it as well. They listen to my Ustream and they come to my talks, which isn't a bad thing, but there's a sense of knowing what's being talked about. And then others most probably think I'm mad and close that door and walk away, and that's perfect as well. And then their energy's ever ready there, then they'll want to listen to it. But they've got a life to lead and being a separate person to deal with.
Yeah. Do you encounter a lot of resistance in general?
No, because most of the people that come to my talks often are in love with the message. So the people that I meet already are really into the talks. And then other people I don't think could be bothered to argue about it. They might not agree with it, but they don't really actively haunt me or chase me around shouting I'm a lunatic. Sometimes you get the occasional person, it tends to be a guy, that gets a bit obsessed and will tend to want to intellectually argue it for a while, but they normally dissipate because I've got nothing really to argue about. I'm like, okay, that's what you think.
Yes.
For a little bit. But it tends to be that more intellect energy that wants to argue with it.
Yes. And do you find that a lot of people seem to get what you're saying, but really you find out later from talking to them that it's really only intellectual understanding?
I think what I see a lot of is that people are awakening, and so they're going in and out of being somebody and not being someone. And so it changes a lot. So at one moment they seem to really hear it, and then the next moment they go back into their story and they think there's a huge problem and that they have to do something about it, and they've got to try and control their life. So that's what I commonly come across
Mm-hmm.
Is that's the typical story. And then I noticed people coming, loving it, leaving, hating, coming, loving it, like that kind of yo-yoing
Yeah,
effect. Because
it's
when the
true.
separate person comes back, that it comes back with the force of wanting to suddenly control its life again and control things, and it gets scared.
Right, right. Yeah. I find there's a lot of in non-dual teachings out there. There's some that are authentic, but there's some that almost say the same words, but you know that it's intellectual. You know that it's not
Yeah.
the,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah,
Hmm.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Even the word non-dual has become so bastardized now. So
Yeah,
it's hard
yeah.
to tell. Yeah. So when you have someone who you feel is going in and out, going in and out, going in and out, is there some guidance that you give them?
No, all I do is just keep doing these questions and answers. So I just keep pointing to the same thing.
Hmm.
And what I think happens is that there is a resonance, a remembering that happens when it's being spoken about.
Hmm.
And so I just keep doing the same thing, but I don't guide someone because I see that as the opposite to what I'm pointing to. I just keep like guiding someone suddenly gets back into them being separate and that they've got to control their life. I have a very simple dialogue. If you come to a few talks, it's always changing and always spontaneous, but it's always pointing to the end of the divide. And I
Hmm.
just get a sense that when that's spoken about, then it's heard beyond themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then if they go back in the story, that's just the energy working its way out. And then when they're ready to hear it again, they'll hear it again.
Hmm. 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 Wonderful. How did this realization come to you?
It didn't exactly come to me. I disappeared into it.
Mm.
There was many years of listening to this message through Buddhism, through non-dual speakers, through poetry, through theatre and film. Many years of loving this,
Hmm.
and loads of awakenings. In fact, if I really think about it, I could taste it all the way from being a child, and then for about 5 years there was lots of flip-flopping. And then when I was in Bali, I was sitting eating banana fritters, having one of those fuck it moments, I don't care. And I was eating banana fritters, which is like deep fried bananas in batter, very tasty, with sugar
Yeah.
on top. And then ice cream for breakfast, and I was having my cup of tea, and it just was like I was looking at the waitress, and I just began to think she was beautiful, and I thought it was to do with her. I was like, wow, she's such a beautiful waitress. How did I not realize? And I just kept looking at her, and then the whole room became beautiful. And I was like, oh my goodness, what a beautiful room. How had I not realized how beautiful this was? And then this carried on about everything. And then it felt like at the time, it felt like an energy came out of my eyes and began to go into everything. It felt like my sense of self, which was maybe feeling like it was in my head, this sense of being someone began to go out forward from my eyes and from sort of more this area, and it began to go into everything, and it began to go forward, and it felt like total love. And the more and more it went forward, the more and more it disappeared, until finally there was no sense of self and world. There was just the world left. So it kind of like fell into everything. And that had been happening for many years, but it was like it was like a knowing of it, but then you get scared and you're like, oh no, I've got to be someone. And then it happened completely unexpectedly, and I wasn't doing anything spiritual at that time. I was just enjoying myself. I
Hmm.
was into music and like eating whatever I wanted, and I'd been spending lots of money which I didn't have.
Now that's a good spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
I'd go for massages. I'd be staying in a really nice hotel. um, and so that was basically, but I wasn't sitting there thinking about anything spiritual. And I always thought that it was going to be a moment of realization. I thought it was going to be a moment of knowing something, but it was actually a total loss. It was
Uh,
like I lost myself. I disappeared. It was the opposite. And even though I'd heard that 1,000 times, I really thought I was going to get something. And I wasn't left with knowing all the answers. It was just wow. It was it was complete opposite to what I thought was going to happen, even though I'd heard all this for many years. And I don't know if all the people that I've been listening to were actually talking about the same thing now. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well,
But
you hear different people speaking about different things. The
yeah,
most common, I think, is talking about suffering. I know that Muji lost his son. Eckhart Tolle had the depression, and
yeah,
some teachers have. It's the suffering that by embracing the suffering or because of the suffering, they were pushed inside, or they were pushed to the other side, so to
yeah.
speak. Very hard to put it in words at some point. So, did you ever go through a period of suffering like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, tremendous. When I was awakening, well, basically, my teens and my 20s were quite tough. I had great moments, but from from such a young age, I had come to the realization that there was nothing in the world for me.
Mm.
I first realized when I was a teenager, and I would sit in my room and everyone was saying you have to have a boyfriend, and I began to love the idea of having a boyfriend and like falling in love and all these romantic movies. And then when I was sitting in my room, I could imagine having a boyfriend, and then suddenly I would disappear and there would just be that total love that I longed from my boyfriend. And then when I actually had the boyfriend, it was always a little bit awkward because he had to be someone and they had to be someone. So I began to enjoy just being by myself better, because by myself I could be absolutely complete.
Mm.
So I realized that when I was 13, maybe even younger, but that's when I consciously remember realizing that. So then it's like you're a little bit screwed, because all my friends were doing the things of getting boyfriends and doing all this partying things, and intellectually I thought I should be doing that because that's what's normal.
Hmm.
But actually I preferred being by myself and with my animals, and I quite like taking drugs, certain hallucinogenic drugs, but I didn't really like the whole socializing of things, and I didn't really get humans. I didn't get why they were so mean, and I didn't get why they were so cruel to animals, and I didn't get all the social things, like why people would repeat things and do the same things again.
Mm.
And I realized it with career. So I always wanted to be an actress. I wasn't very good at school, but I was very good at acting. And then I got onto TV, and then I was like, actually, it's better imagining about it. The reality of it is like quite boring. It takes a long time, and it's a little bit embarrassing, all the attention. So I kind of realized that nothing in the world would ever give me what I wanted. What I wanted was already present, but I didn't know how to get to that, how to maintain that. And I didn't understand that when I tried to be something, I lost it. So in my 20s, I had all my friends, doing the boyfriends, wanting to get married, being successful. And then I was split because I knew it wasn't in that. But at the same time, I felt ashamed not to be the same as everybody else. So,
I know
and I
that.
didn't understand society. I didn't understand why people didn't question everything.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand why they were just happy with getting married and having the kids. Like, I would be like, there's so much more. So I suffered, and then also we had a lot of personal tragedy when I was growing up in my family, in my immediate family, a lot of illness, which most people, again, most white young girls, middle class young girls, wouldn't go through. So again, I found that hard to relate with my peers. Like, I didn't know, like, things that I'd seen and experienced, the people around me couldn't talk about, and I was also confused about that. So it also made me feel like an outcast.
Yeah.
And I knew that I should be acting like a young, like, typical English girl, and I was like, but no, none of this makes sense. It's also perfect when we just stop being something.
I know.
I'm told it's about the money and the career and the da-da-da, but no.
I know.
So I did suffer a lot in my 20s.
Yeah.
A lot, like not just regular suffering. At points it was like wanting to throw myself under a bus.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I think it's really tough when you feel inside that there's something so much more,
Yeah,
and nothing on the outside world
Yeah.
conforms to that or supports that, and in some cases are violently opposed to it.
Yeah.
And
And now it's a little bit easier for people because of the internet. You know, when I
yeah,
started at 18, that was in the 90s, there wasn't the ability to, you had to go to the library and like to try and imagine the subject in the library. Like I had to try and imagine a section to look at. I remember getting a witchcraft book and being like, nope, that's not it. Like that was like the best I could do. It's like witchcraft, nope. It's not it. And then becoming a wizard, and I was like, nope, that's not it. And then the psychology books, and it was hard, but like now it's so much easier because you can just type it into the internet.
exactly, and everything pops up. All the non-duality
Yeah.
with all the additives to it. You know,
Yeah.
I do feel sometimes that from what you're talking about, I often feel that it's almost like there's two species, human species. There's this species that all they want is to have a good life and to better themselves, improve themselves. Even if they end up somehow on a spiritual path, they do it for that purpose.
Yeah.
And there's another species that actually want to wake up, and it
Yeah.
burns in them to the point where nothing will stop them.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Definitely, definitely. And it does feel, when I was a kid, I remember identifying at the age of 3 or 4, and it did feel like I had there was two options. There was being human or not being human. And I know that sounds so alien, but it felt like if I didn't put on the jacket of Lisa, I wouldn't be able to be human with other people. I wouldn't be able to have any relationships. And
Right.
it's such different worlds. It really is. And when there's been a taste of that, and I suspect that most people that really, really are interested in this message, they've been tasting it since they were a child, and they know it so deeply, and it's so, they become so disturbed in a way, because then this other world, this human world, is telling them they've got to be something which is so untrue. It's
That's it.
such a false world. But I'm not criticizing other humans, because there seems to be a functioning in them which doesn't mind so much. They don't mind.
Yeah.
Otherwise they would be interested in this subject. They don't mind being someone, and they seem to find enough refuge in being something and things. But I suspect that the other people have been a lot more sensitive their whole life. So that since a child, they've had a very strong taste of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
it's spoken about, and that's exactly what I do, is I just keep repeating what it is, and it's like a remembering. It's like, I know this. And that's what used to happen to me. I'd hear it in Buddhism, and as soon as it was spoken of, and it wasn't about practicing or doing, but as soon as it was spoken of, it was like, I know this. I
Hmm.
know it. And I didn't have to practice to get it. It was something that was so deep and that was always there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's beautiful. Just
Yeah.
stay with that for a moment. I hope the viewers don't mind. Sometimes when I speak to someone like Lisa, it's just nice to be.
Yeah. Just to lose the words, yeah.
Yeah, it's not because there's nothing to say. It's just, um, well, there is nothing to say, but we're talking anyways because it's an interview. Uh, so let's hear something about your book. Tell me about your book.
Oh, this is a friend of mine called Julie. She listened to the first ever talk that I did many years ago, and she had an instantaneous awakening just from listening to this talk, energetic awakening, and knew what I was talking about. This is like one of the first talks I think I ever did, and so since then we've kept in contact, and sometimes I think now, like there's been an awakening happening there. Sometimes she hates it and then loves it again, and like when the awakening comes, like sometimes the person comes back and just rejects it, and then there's a love of it again. And
Mhm.
so through those 3 or 4 years, every time she was in love with it and listening, and she loved something that I said, she transcribed it.
Oh,
So that's how it came about.
wow.
And she's
Fantastic.
even started on the second one, but we've only just published the first one. So when she really enjoys something I say, and she does it with other speakers as well, actually, when she really loves something, she just finds herself transcribing it.
Wonderful.
And she's really, really, really good at transcribing. It's a really hard thing to do, to actually keep to the voice of the person.
Yeah.
But she's so good. She did a really nice job. I read it just before it was published, and I didn't even feel like it was my words. Not because it sounded different, but because when you're speaking about non-duality, it's completely nothing to do with you, and it comes out, and there's no memory really of it.
Right.
And just read it as if it was another book that someone had given to me, and I put it down. And I was like, that was beautiful. It sounds really vain, but it's so not if you knew how much it doesn't feel like anything to do with me.
Yeah.
So, I think she edited and she put like different introductions together, and edited it really nicely, so it feels like somebody's written it. Like it feels very system.
That's fantastic. Can you read something to us from it?
Sure. I'll just you can name a page, and then I'll go to the nearest chapter.
Oh, 85.
85. That's funny. Peace, it's called.
Ah! Oh, for heaven's sake.
And it's all about love, I think, this one. Thank goodness you didn't go to the rape one. I think there's a whole chapter on rape.
Okay. Definitely peace.
Okay. So, love is what is. I cannot see love as ours or yours. That would be like love with conditioned. Conditioned love is about trying to get something or trying to give that love to someone. Love is the essence of everything. It's not that helping a dog or rescuing a dog from Thailand doesn't happen. I just rescued a dog from Thailand.
Yes.
It's not, but it's not that those things don't happen, but it's not my love. It wasn't that I decided to do that. Life wrote in that momentum. Because life is in opposites, there is always going to be decay and destruction. It's part of what happens in this. There is never going to be a peaceful world in what happens, because the way in which life is set up is for one thing to change into another form continuously. At the same time, it's happening and it's not happening. You could say that there is a side where it's not really changing or moving, and a side where movement is happening. And in that movement is always one form is changing into another form. As soon as one form becomes its most beautiful, it then begins to decay and be destroyed and change into another form. There's never going to be peace in the flow of life. There's never going to be the peaceful idea that humans long for. The peace is an illusion. It's all about mental concepts of how we would like it to look. It is what it is, and love is the end of the resistance to what is. That doesn't mean that helping or bringing the dog back to England doesn't happen, but it's not mine. I'm not compassionate. I'm not claiming any of that. That to me is the arrogance, is the mistake. It's just something that happens in love. It also works the other way around. Take the murderer or the paedophile. If that's the character that is played out, then that also doesn't belong to them. This role doesn't belong to someone. It's just what's happening. I see love as being completely impersonal. When love is personalized, then it's, what can I get from that person? How can I give them my love, or how can I get love from another? When it's not personal, then love is everything, and everything is continuously changing into different forms. There is always destruction happening as well as growth. When it's personalized, then the suffering begins. Oh, so it totally doesn't feel like mine, but that's very sweet.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. There's, I've heard for so many years, people throwing these words, unconditional love, unconditional love. A, a person can't have unconditional love.
And in the appearance of the robot, it's always conditioned in a way. So in the like appearance of the Lisa character, it's conditioned. So it's not like the character is conditioned in the sense of it doesn't just live with someone that beats it up continuously out of an act of love, because that's the end of resistance to it. It's conditioned. Like you stay in a relationship because you both mutually get enjoyment from each other or mutually help each other. So it's not like like you have to accept everything, or you have to accept that your lover brings back 1,000 lovers every weekend and you have to sit in your bedroom like, ah! That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the essence of life. And these robots are conditioned, but these robots are a play, just like the sun is conditioned to be hot and the wind is conditioned to blow and the tree is conditioned to be a tree. This robot has to be this robot, and it has to be work in the dynamics of the human game. But that's not who we are. Who we are is life, essentially.
Exactly.
So I never mean to reject like the human habits or ways or behavior. It's not about you becoming something and you having to accept your boyfriend's 1,000 lovers. This will be endless. It's all about you trying to be something. It's not what we're talking about. Absolutely. But often that's what people hear, and then I hear then people come and say, oh, but I just can't accept that my boyfriend does this or that. And it's not about you accepting.
You talk a lot in the videos that I've heard. You use the phrase "it is written."
Yeah,
it is written, and if I understand you correctly, it's in reference to we don't really create, we don't really, things happen. Yeah. Is there a point, there seems to me that there's one, it's not that it's an exception to it, but maybe a different kind of doing that is a non-doing. And this is very hard for me to put in words, but I'm sure you through talking about it, you might have found the lingo for it. There seems to still need to be some kind of willingness.
I don't know what you mean by that.
There's I don't do the path. I don't do presence. I don't do non-duality. But there's a willingness to engage in that.
I would call it more a ripeness, like the energy is ripe to that message, like the energy is like but willingness, actually you can say whatever you like, but it's all what you're used to in language, like willingness. It wouldn't be somebody's effort, but there's an opening, there's something that can be heard. There's a basically what happens is the person dies, so there has to be such a strong draw to that message, because it's not often very pleasant dying while the body's still alive.
Yes. I know the feeling.
So there has to be this, and I think it's what we discussed earlier. It's like a knowing beyond anything, not even in the world of doubt and non-doubt. It's like a knowing so deep of a freedom that's beyond the person. So, and I wouldn't say it's their willingness, but the energy is just so attracted to it, like magnets. Like, or like a moth going towards the flame, or toward the fire. It just cannot help it. It's so attracted and mesmerized and knows so deeply that there's something beyond themselves.
Right. So that seemingly burns away the resistance, and we call it willingness, I guess.
Because otherwise, because you can try speaking about this with certain people, and they won't come back.
Yes.
They'll just go for the pleasure. They'll be offered something more pleasurable. They'll get the highs out of the intellectual understanding it, maybe.
Yes.
And then they're just off then onto the next high, to the next pleasure sensation.
Right. And then they think that now they know.
Yeah. And they often become teachers.
God help us. Okay, page 13.
Page 13?
13.
13. I like that number 13.
Yeah.
Story. Oh.
The other side.
My story. I'll just read you a little bit of it. Okay. It's a bit long, but I'll just if it gets too long, I'll stop. Gosh. My memory is bad these days, so I misremember things and leave things out. also, I want to point out this is only Lisa's version of events. It's not the truth, it's not what's happened, but it's what's recorded in the Lisa brain. I'm sure the others in the story would tell it completely differently. High board. Often my parents would take us swimming in the local pool, I think on a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon. I think it was mostly my dad that would take us. I remember him being the shark chasing us, his familiar face popping up from the water going, rah! I remember one of the pools had a high diving board. There was 3, a small, a middle, and a very high one. My older brother James would run to the top one and jump straight away. I'd follow him up and sit on the edge of the highest diving board on his second turn. I always wanted to follow him. I loved his courage. He seemed so brave to me. Sometimes I would sit there the whole of the swimming session at the top of the high diving board, waiting to jump, my feet dangling off the edge. Often as my dad called me in, I would start crying as I climbed back down the steps. I never wanted to be afraid of anything. My brother was a beautiful child. People thought he was a girl. He was so pretty. He had deep red ringlets, large hazel eyes, and his personality was soft and giggly. He was born 3 years before me. I don't really remember too much about our childhood. It feels so distant now, like a different life. There are points that stand out, sometimes the bits that shocked me or frightened me, rather than the good memories. Shame that's what the brain records, but it's pretty obvious that's how it works. I think the saddest memory this body has witnessed has been watching my brother. I was 10 when my brother was first put into a psychiatric ward. He was 13. The explanation that had been given to me was that he had broken his head, like a broken arm, that his head was broken. I noticed if I told people this, they would look at me with sad eyes and ask me if I was okay. I didn't really understand this. I didn't understand it was bad or sad. I didn't understand that this broken head was what made him scream for hours in the night with my dad having to pin him down. I didn't understand his broken head was what made him shake with fear and refuse to eat, or having him make my gran and I wear tinfoil to protect us against aliens. I thought that was just my brother. I wasn't really sure what a broken head was. I quite liked breaking my arm. I got loads of attention and presents. It hurt at first, but it made me feel so important. So I wasn't sure that it was a bad thing. I didn't realize it was bad until we left him for the first time in the hospital. The nurses had no restraint on him as he screamed and begged us not to leave. I found this rather amusing, so much activity and shouting, like the TV, like EastEnders. My mother, father, I, and my dog had to walk down a thin path to leave, him screaming and banging on the glass doors behind us. Nurses everywhere. I hear my dad laugh, thank God. I thought it was okay to laugh, so I laughed and laughed. My mum in front of me cries, wails like she's been killed. How odd. I went to her saying, "Don't cry, Mum, it's funny really, Dad's laughing." She looked like she was going to collapse, and my dad rushed forward and catches her. I look at his face, he was laughing. He wasn't laughing, I realised, he was crying. The guilt. I had never in my 10 years experienced the agony of guilt. I felt physically sick for weeks. My parents had cried on the way home that night in the car. I sat in the back with my dog Bonnie and burned in guilt. I thought it was funny. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. I had never seen them both cry before. I didn't know my dad did, and I had said to them out loud it was funny. I couldn't play with my friends at school. I couldn't concentrate. My insides ached, and I just kept replaying the hour-long journey with them crying. I know now my brother's broken head was very bad. I cried myself to sleep at night, so sad at them being sad. I wished I could take all their pain away. I cried and cried at the sadness of them. My parents looked so sad all the time. My mum would cry in the mornings as she did her hair. I began to dream of ways I could help people. I dreamed of setting up a dog home to rescue unwanted dogs. Funny what the mind does when there is pain. Do you want me to carry on? It's a bit long. There's 2 more pages.
Yeah, go. Whatever you...
One night I plucked up the courage to apologise to my mum for laughing. We were watching EastEnders and it just came out. I just tried to explain to her that I didn't understand it was bad. She hugged and told me it was all right. The guilt began to fade after this. it never really ended, my brother's illness. Well, that's what they call it. It's been 25 years now of drugs and doctors and social workers and hospitals. I can tell you the saddest tales of suffering, suffering beyond anyone's imagination, not because there was a problem in the flow, but because my brother's brain imagined problems. Hours sitting outside the hospital in the cars crying just for the sadness of him, knowing no matter what happened, it wouldn't make his brain tell better stories. I saw hell wasn't about the flow. It wasn't about what happened. It wasn't about how the brain interpreted it. Even though society would tell you it was about the flow, I knew it wasn't. My brother saw hell when it wasn't there. My life began to get darker after that day. My parents were heartbroken, and they seemed to spend less and less time at home, of course. My disabled grand lived with us, and I was, oh, that's enough now. It goes on to a different story. There.
I appreciate your openness in talking about it.
Yeah.
A lot of spiritual teachers, if I may call that, shy away from talking about the negative stuff. It's, you know,
Yeah.
It's very important because it's part of life. It doesn't
Yeah.
disappear just because we don't like it.
And if you've ever, if you've got a mental illness, well, what we call as a mental illness, I don't really like all the labels of it, but if you have it, or if you know someone with it, then you know the impossibility of it. It's not like a pill that you can take where it makes things better.
Yeah.
It's not like you can bandage it up, or another illness where you can find it. Like if you break your arm, or if you have cancer, they understand it, they can scan it, and they have a treatment for it. It's just not like that with a mental illness. And it's one of the, I think, the saddest things in the human aspect to come to terms with, that there's no easy way to fix it. It's not like I can just go and put a plaster on him and say, be better. And I can't just talk him into being better. It's something that either will happen or doesn't happen. It's a very sad thing.
It's a very sad thing, and it's at the same time, it's a situation where the mind cannot possibly, or the person cannot possibly come up with a solution for it.
Yeah.
And for some reason that's spiritually actually a healthy thing, because at some point the mind has to give up. The story has to give up. Sometimes that's what it takes, you know?
Yeah. And it really is, it is something that you can't just find a solution to at all. Even if you drug people, basically now they say with drugs is that basically what they're doing with drugs is they're sedating people. They're not actually helping them. They're just sedating them because they don't know what to do.
Exactly.
They don't understand it.
Yeah. And society doesn't care much for anything that's not normal.
Yeah. And anything that you can't hope about. So what people find disturbing about my brother, and they'll often not talk about it, is because you can't say, like, if somebody's got cancer, you can hope that they will get better. Exactly. Whereas with my brother, it's not like that. You can't say, oh, well, you know, if he gets into spirituality, or maybe Lisa could speak to him about non-duality. It's not something like that. It's not saying that he will always stay like that. There might be a change, but it's not something that you can just hope and fix about. And hope, I see hope as, I don't see hope as a friend. I see hope as something which people use when they're suffering a lot in order to escape what the feeling is of it. Like, we hope, as soon as my brother got ill when I was a kid, I began to hope that I could then one day set up this dog charity, because I couldn't deal emotionally with what was happening. So I then lived in the imagination. So I don't see, you often romanticize hope, but I see hope as a massive escape that we use in order to not deal with what's happening, which is something mysterious and unknowable, and it's not something we control, that we can fix and we can bandage up. That's
right. We really go about life in a very in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Trying to fix something or have a hope for a future, a better future, rather than surrendering to the present moment.
And life can be really messy and incredibly sad. Like, even now, I realize it's quite stable now, but even now, you know, if he were to go into hospital, this is a really, it's not just joyful emotions that it creates. Like, you know, I can really cry going in and seeing him. It's really sad that he has to, that suffering has to be presented. But I don't live under the illusion anymore that I can fix it. I used to think for a while I could fix it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same that I do in the talks. I just have this attitude: if it's heard, it's heard. But I don't have this any energy of like, I've got to fix you, I've got to make you enlightened or different. If it's heard, it's heard. If there's interest, there's interest. If there's not, then there might be interest in something else, which is beautiful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. How does your family or your close friends respond to the changes in you, what you've become?
Well, during the awakening, I lost a lot of my younger like friends from teenage years. There's one friend who I still have, and this is really amazing, but about 3 or 4 years ago she had a spontaneous awakening.
Oh, wonderful.
And she phoned me and she said, I think you're the only person that I could tell this to. I know what you're talking about. She got everything she wanted. She'd always wanted to live with her boyfriend, and she moved in with her boyfriend. She got a house, and she got the job she wanted, and she sat there and she thought, I'm complete now, I've got everything. And then poof. We'd spoken about non-duality, but she'd never really been that into it. She loved thinking, and a few weeks before we'd been walking along the river and she was like, Lisa, I've worked out that nothing actually inherently has meaning. And I was like, cute. And I was thinking of even listening to my talks, but she didn't listen to my talks. So
Wow.
that's the only friend that I've really maintained since I was 11. I knew her, we were best friends at 11, but she always had an inquisitive mind, and now she knows what's being talked about. So that's really sweet. My parents are really amazing because they've had such a hard time with my brother. They just have no arrogance left. They don't have that kind of attitude that we know the way to life and that we know better than you. So my mom and dad's attitude, even though they still see themselves as separate, their attitude is, as long as you're happy. Wow. The only thing that she told me off about, which I found quite amusing, she didn't mind everything. She read the book and she didn't mind any of it, except I said that we were a dysfunctional family. And she was like,
she took that personally.
She was like, I mean, you could have just left that out. I'm not dysfunctional. And I was like, but Mom, I think all humans are. It's just the nature of being human.
Exactly. Show me a family that isn't dysfunctional.
I know, and I was like, it's not like your friends aren't. And she was like, yeah, well, everything else. And I was like, well, that's interesting. She could take the no self and that there's nobody here and that there is no separate God and that nobody has free will and choice. All that's okay, but dysfunctional families was like... So I said in the next book I wouldn't put it.
I don't have a self, but I do have a family. Oh, that's good.
They're really sweet and they're really supportive.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then I said to them, don't you feel, because my mom's been selling all the books to her friends. I was like, don't do that, they're going to think it's weird. And she was like, I don't mind. That's up to them if they think it's weird.
Let her sell them.
Yeah. So I was like, well,
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
I think she also is quite happy that I talk about my brother, because she's also an activist for mental health in the UK, and she's really into it becoming more public knowledge and people not being afraid of it.
Yeah. That's very important. Right. Yeah. People are so afraid of anything unusual.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, maybe you can read one more thing before we sum it up. 99.
99. I like it. I like the way that she named it all. So this one's just called Dog.
Oh, okay. Dog lovers will love this part.
Yeah. I have a beautiful dog. This is true. Maybe she'll come in a minute. And I love watching her. She has no idea that she's alive, and she has no idea that she's going to die. She has no idea we're in a dangerous situation or if the situation is good. She has no idea about any of it. And the response in the body mind mechanism is absolute joy. The side effect in the body, because she has no idea who she is happiness, spontaneous joy. Whatever happens, she's totally in it. She's totally involved in it, and she's and that total involvement is absolute love. She's in love with anything that's appearing, no matter what it is. She's 100% into it. There's no sense that it's happening to her, or that she gets 10 years of life, 14 if she's lucky. There's no sense that she's got to have a happy life and make the most of it, or that she's got to be rich, successful, slim, and have lots of babies. She just is. In every moment, she simply is, for nothing. She has no reason, nothing. She has no reason to live. She doesn't even know she's living. She just is living. But, this is the but, she's not a perfect body-mind mechanism. Now I know this is really hard to believe. This is a joke. It might sound really arrogant, that a supremely enlightened person doesn't have a friendly dog, but it can happen. She's a vicious dog. She likes to bite. Well, she doesn't bite. She's never bitten, but she likes to go grrr if people stroke her, if people she doesn't know stroke her. She also likes to fight with girl dogs, and she never, ever, ever wants to share her food, ever. She likes to roll in poo. She likes to dunk and dip. We call it the dunk and dip because she's walking along, there's a bit of poo on the floor, and she just dunks her neck in it. She practically like, she particularly likes it if it's swan or duck poop, duck perfume. She never suffers, ever, even when the cat chases her down the street and she's crying, even when she's scared or shaking, or if I'm telling her off, or if she's growling at somebody. There is never, ever an ounce of suffering, because it's not happening to somebody. It's not happening to her. There's no energetic contraction inside the body that feels like it's happening to her, and that she needs life to be a certain way.
Wow.
I just have to get her now because she's so cute.
Okay.
Easy. Come on, Easy. No, my boyfriend's walking her. My very sweet boyfriend is walking her.
Oh, he's walking her now. Okay. What's the dog's name?
Khaleesi.
Khaleesi. Oh, nice. Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow, this has been absolutely wonderful, Lisa. I love how you are so, there's, again, this is going to be hard to say in words. There comes a point where words just don't matter anymore. But you're so transcendent of this dimension. You are so beyond the picture and so beyond the story and so supremely free, and at the same time you come across as a real human being. You know what I mean? It's like there's nothing artificial or pretentious or intellectual about your experience, and I really appreciate that very much.
Oh, thank you. I do think that what it does do to the body is, and this is going to sound odd when I was saying about not being human earlier, but it does make the human more human. Like the human, it's like you become totally yourself. So Lisa just becomes Lisa. She's not then Lisa who's enlightened, or Lisa who's she just is in every moment the Lisa reactions coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa spontaneity.
Yeah. Obviously,
sometimes it does sound with non-duality that you become like you stop behaving like a normal human being, or you just sit there like in peace all day, but it becomes, I think, more human.
Yes. Well, you're obviously evidencing that. I could see it. I could feel it with you. There's no mental or conceptual inhibitions to how Lisa should be.
Yeah.
Because there's no story about Lisa. It's just Lisa.
She is as she is, just like her dog Khaleesi.
Yeah.
Oh, the boyfriend does something wrong. I'm, oh yeah.
Exactly. Wonderful. Is there any other message that you want to offer here before we wrap up?
No, but she just came in.
Oh, wonderful.
She just is by the door. Come, Easy. Yeah. Yeah, Easy.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Lucy. Hi.
She's so sweet.
It's a beautiful dog. Non-duality dog.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a contradiction. A contradiction. To name a dog, to label a dog is. Let's not do that to them.
Yeah.
We do it enough to each other.
Yeah.
Well, can you show us the book, Lisa, so
Yeah,
people
sure.
see what it looks like? There it is. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Oh, if I
I
put it
love the
further.
cover. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah,
I was happy with that.
yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for agreeing
Thank
to speak
you.
with
It was
us.
lovely. And this was a really lovely interview. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad. I'm so
Yeah.
glad.
It's so, I don't mean to sound, I've brought it up a couple of times, but it's often men that I get interviewed, and they're so different with a masculine energy. Like, women are so much more happy not to be in the intellect or concepts or trying to get it right.
Exactly.
Well,
Intellect is overrated. Yeah.
nice.
Good. Yeah, it's very nice because it's talking to you is like talking to a sister.
Yeah.
It's so naturally and it flows and it's beautiful. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it as well. So thank you so much,
Thanks.
and thank you everyone for watching. And I highly encourage you to go on Lisa's website and find out when her retreats are and order her book. It sounds fantastic to me. I can't wait to read it myself. So that's it for now, and stay tuned for next time. Thank you, and God bless.
Bye.
Bye.